Hello, and welcome to 30 Minutes with Government. I am your host, Giselle Misudan York. In today's edition of 30 Minutes with Government, we take a look at the recently held lecture by the Council of Advice. Newly appointed Labour mediator, Marcelina LeBlanc, shares insight into her new position. Minister Jacobs kicks off the St. Martin's Soccer Educational Foundation Tournament. National Health Insurance Conference speaker, Professor Van der Ven, and Minister Lee meets with NHI Bahamas. All this and more on 30 Minutes with Government. Stay tuned.
Family law, criminal law, labor law, corporate law, immigration law, electoral law, tax law, environmental law, inheritance law. The law matters to you. A joint venture between the Department of Communication and the University of St. Martin. The lecture series, The Law Matters to You, is aimed at informing and providing the general public of St. Martin about the different laws. We invite you to visit the official government website at www.stmartingov.org for details on upcoming lectures. The law matters to you, bringing the law closer to the people.
On Friday, February 10th, the Council of Advice held a lecture at the University of St. Martin entitled St. Martin and the European Union After 2020. After the audience was welcomed by Chairlady of the Council of Advice, Mrs. Mavis Brooks Solomon, the keynote address was given by Professor Dr. Flora Godappel, law professor in the Netherlands. The following is an excerpt of the lecture.
Why St. Martin and the European Union? St. Martin has an official partnership with the European Union, being an overseas countries and territory, or OCT. And for that, I've got a map. St. Martin is not alone in that. This is not meant as a detailed study here. It's basically more text than very small dots on the map. What you see here is the overseas countries and territories, and also the other category, outermost regions, which I'll tell you a bit more about later on, which are all in some sort of partnership with the European Union. They belong not only to the Netherlands, but also to France, to the UK, and the big one up north, Greenland, belongs or is linked at least to Denmark. It is basically autonomous territories linked to the European Union, remnants of former empires. They're often called the confetti of empire. So what's basically left right now in this system is not the large countries, sub-Sahara countries, which are former colonies who have now become independent from especially France and the UK. But we are talking about smaller islands, mostly, with one or two exceptions. French Guiana is one of them, which have, for all kinds of reasons, decided to still have some sort of link with the former colonizer in an autonomous way. And for that, of course, France has a different constitutional structure than the Netherlands or the UK or Denmark. If you look at it, the French are traditionally a bit more centralized. So the links are stronger. And the British tend to be much more independent. The British Virgin Islands, for instance, always claim that they they are completely financially independent of the UK, and that the EU is actually one of their trading partners via this system, and not so much like development aid.
On Wednesday, January 25th, 2017, His Excellency, the Governor of St. Martin, Eugene Holliday, administered the oath to 3 new labor mediators for St. Martin, Mr. Amador Muller, Mr. Leroy Brooks, and Mrs. Marcelina LeBlanc. The Department of Communication had a chance to sit and talk with mediator Mrs. Marcelina LeBlanc about her newly appointed position and the role of mediation.
What is a labor mediator?
A labor mediator is basically someone that gets involved when there's a dispute between workers and management. There's a union, and the union represents the workers, and then the mediator is asked either via the union or via management to get involved in order to have a clear understanding of the different parties' interaction.
What are your tasks and responsibilities as prescribed by law?
The law provides us to mediate, whereas we mediate when it's deadlocks, lockouts, or disputes in negotiations of CLA and also in negotiations with referendums also.
What is your expertise, background in relation to the labor field?
I've been actually employed with the Labor Department for the past 10 years. This year coming make me 10 years working at the Labor Department. And also I'm going to have 25 years in government. So given the overall view, I have a lot of background.
Where do the labor mediator fall within the structure of government?
The labor mediator falls right now, we are under the Department of Labor, and then hopefully in the near future, when I say near future, hopefully by the end of the year, we will have the Labor Mediators Bureau, which will be a separate entity away from the Department of Labor.
Give us your perspective why you believe there is a need for labor mediators on St. Martin.
Basically is to have peace and equality between management and employees. For the simple fact, employees like to take advantage of the workers, and also the workers feel that they can do whatever they feel like when it comes to their employers. So therefore the mediator comes in very handy to make sure everything is at ease and at rest.
When is the right time to come to the labor mediator for assistance?
Basically, the right time I would advise anyone to come to the labor mediator when they see or foresee a dispute or animosity between management and workers arising. It's best to come to the labor mediator before it gets out of hand. Normally, most of the time, workers will wait until it's too late and then to get a mediator involved. I believe if you get a mediator involved from the beginning, it helps ease the tension between workers and management.
What are the alternatives of coming to the labor mediator?
The alternative of coming to the mediator grants you, most of the majority of the time, equality between management and workers and unions. They give you that peace of mind because a mediator basically mediates. They doesn't pick either side. They try to stay in the middle as neutral as possible when it comes to those disputes.
But is there an other alternative before a worker or an employer comes to the mediator?
Basically, the alternative, they go, if it's an individual case, it goes to the Labor Affairs. That's by Carnegie Street, Nesbitt Street. They go and file a complaint there. But what we do a collective where it's more than one, two, if it's the entire staff, workers, then they come to us, but via the union representative, of course.
The legal framework. What is the jurisdiction of the mediator and who do you represent?
We represent basically both workers and the employers. The jurisdiction is we are allowed to, if we feel that there's a dispute or a lockout, we can intervene and we notify the minister because we are actually fall directly also under the minister and we respond to him. So,
the national ordinance regulating labor disputes and resolutions thereof. What is some important aspects for persons to know about the laws within?
Many persons feel not to take the laws into account, especially when it comes to management, employers. Employers, some of them comes from different countries with a different idea on how the labor laws operate in St. Martin. And when it comes to the mediator, you know, from the time they hear the mediator, they feel they need to get a lawyer. Something is wrong. And most of the time, nothing is wrong, but they feel not that they should not adhere to the law that's of the country. And we have to explain, no, this is the laws of the country, and you have to abide by them. And it's sometimes difficult. We end up in court cases with workers, with the companies, in order to get a clear picture. But most of the companies, international companies for sure, feel that they need to send everything via the lawyer.
Where can the public find the laws?
If they go on the government website under the Department of Labor, which falls under the Ministry of VSA, they click on mediator, they will find all the laws there in Dutch. I think they also have them in English. I'm not too sure, but I know we are busy getting them officially translated also in English.
Help us to understand. What is a collective agreement, CLA?
A CLA, a collective agreement, is basically a document that guides the company and the workers on their working expertise and what management expects from the workers and what workers expect from the management as well. It covers basically vacation allowance, time off, medical health. Different things can be put in a CLA that benefits both the workers and management.
How is a collective agreement filed with government?
Well, once a collective agreement is signed off, they're supposed to register it at the Department of Labor, which is the mediator's office, to register it in our files. Normally, they have to send it to the Minister of Labor, but instead of going to the Minister of Labor, that's where the mediator's office comes in, because we report directly to the minister, so it's easier to bring it to us and we do the registration.
After an agreement is ratified, how long does it take for the parties to draft and sign the new collective agreement?
Once it's ratified, it basically takes, some unions takes 2 to 3 days. Some takes longer because, of course, you got the employees who still wants different changes into the CLA, so it can take a little longer.
The labor unions. What role do labor unions play while a case is being labor mediated?
The labor unions basically have to keep peace, allow their members, which is the employees, to understand that once they are basically negotiating a CLA, there is no need for disruption at the workplace or lockouts or strikes. Most of the time workers are impatient and they feel that the union is not working fast enough for them, things are not happening fast enough, and they get a little unease. So the union basically their task is to maintain peace with their employees.
The mediators is also the official overseers of labor referendums within companies. Help us understand what is the procedures to have this carried out.
For a referendum to be held, management can request it or the union can request it. Referendum, they have to prove, first of all, before a union can take part in a referendum, they have to prove they have the majority of the said worker, which is 50% plus 1, in order for a referendum process to start. And when the process starts, the company is notified. An ad is placed in a newspaper that a referendum was requested for a particular company. Unions have 14 days to respond. Other unions can take part, not per se that particular union, but any union that feel that they also has a majority of that employees of that company can take part. And then from there, the mediator has a meeting with both management and union to determine the categories. The mediator determines the categories who is allowed to take part. Most of the time, unions like to leave out contract workers and management. If the mediator finds that the contract workers is minority, they can be allowed to vote. But it all depends on the weighing out the pros and cons in that case. Once the referendum is held during that day, the union the mediator determines if the union wins, because they have to have 50% plus 1 of the workers that voted in favor of the union. Because 50% plus 1 could turn out, but if they did not vote in favor of the union does not represent that company.
How much cases do your office mediate per year, would you say?
In the last couple of years, we've been extremely busy. Busy in the sense that more and more people are getting familiar with unions and being unionized. And that is giving us a lot of work lately. We have a lot of dispute, a lot of CLAs, a lot of referendum. Last year we had, I think, 8 or 9 referendums. We completed 5 referendums in 1 week. Every day we did a referendum. People are being more and more observant that, hey, there is labor unions out there that can represent us, so why not be a part of a union? And it is their right. And management now, on the other hand, now there is like, hey, we don't want a union into our company. Why are you going for a union? Let me give you extra benefits. So what most companies are doing now, they're trying to sugarcoat everything. So to keep the union out, they're giving the extras to the employees, extra bonus, extra raise, just in order to keep unions up. Well, of course, we have some good, strong unions here on the island that determine that, hey, no, the workers need union representation, and we're going to seek referendum.
Cases that do not have a clear outcome, how are they dealt with?
Cases that are not clear, if there's still a deadlock, they have the alternative to request the court to deal with it, and once it goes to via the court, the mediator has to step out. Then the mediator takes no longer in the decision making where that is concerned.
What percentage of businesses on St. Martin have labor unions representation? Do the size of the company and the number of staff dictate the need for having a labor union? If there is a minimum, what is your criteria for getting involved?
Basically, in the hotel industry, I must say the hospitality industry, they are the majority that are unionized. Most hotels, if not all, are unionized. Casinos, the majority of the casinos are unionized. Some of the small companies on the island still are not unionized. The bigger companies like GB, TLM, those are unionized also. So I would say a good amount of companies on the island is unionized. What we are seeing though, the smaller companies for some reason feel that they doesn't have the right for a union, and if it's 2 employees, 3 employees, I mean, you have that right to be a part of any union. So I suggest they find unions, get union representation, because in cases of any dispute, you know, the union is there to guide you and to be like your lawyer.
If a mediator appears to be biased, where do one file a complaint?
They file a complaint by the Minister of Labor. If they feel the mediator is biased or whatever, they have the right to file a complaint with the Minister of Labor, because that's where the mediator falls directly under.
For more information, how can the mediators be contacted?
We can be contacted on CA Cannegator Street 46, that's downstairs Duncan and Brandon office, or they can call us on 542-3704.
And is there a website?
They can actually, no, we doesn't have a website as yet. We just fall under the Labor, Department of Labor, but they can always email us, which is my email address, which is marcelina.loblack@stmartingov.org.
2017 public holiday schedule. Good Friday, Friday, April 14th. Easter Sunday, Sunday, April 16th. Easter Monday, Monday, April 17th. King's Day, Thursday, April 27th. Labor Day, Monday, May 1st. Carnival Day, Tuesday, May 2nd. Ascension Day, Thursday, May 25th. Whit Sunday, Sunday, June 4th. Emancipation Day, Saturday, July 1st. Constitution Day, Monday, October 9th. St. Martin's Day, Saturday, November 11th. Christmas Day, Monday, December 25th. Boxing Day, Tuesday, December 26th. And New Year's Day, Monday, January 1st, 2018. The 2017 public holiday schedule can also be viewed on the official website of the Government of St. Martin, www.stmartingov.org.
On Saturday, February 4th, the St. Martin Soccer Educational Foundation Tournament, the SMSEF, held the opening of its 25th soccer tournament at the John Krytoff Court in Belvedere. The tournament, which hosts all the elementary schools, is a yearly event which sees a high level of participation at various age levels and includes both genders. The tournament was kicked off by the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport Affairs, Ms. Sylvia Jacobs. Minister Jacobs, in her opening address to the student athletes, parents, teachers, coaches, and organizers, encouraged all players to play hard, enjoy the camaraderie, and embrace the thought of good sportsmanship. More than 300 students will participate in a tournament which is scheduled to continue until May 2017. The SMSEF is commended for their endurance in hosting these elementary school football competitions over the years. The minister looks forward to the SMSEF and a governing body for soccer collaborating to grow the sport from grassroots through school sports right up to the competitive levels, and even provide our youth with opportunities to pursue their dreams later in life at professional levels. In continuing coverage of the National Health Insurance Conference held on January 26th and 27th, we featured the presentation of Professor Wijnand van der Ven, Professor of Health Insurance at Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Dr. van der Ven's teaching and recent research focuses on regulated competition in healthcare, risk equalization, managed healthcare, and international comparisons. We now go to Professor van der Ven at the Davie Little Bay Beach Hotel.
Let's start with the Netherlands. A relatively small country in Western Europe. We have 17 million inhabitants, 17. And just like Sint Maarten, we've had a long and intense debate about national health insurance. In the last century, many proposals have been put forward on the table and kicked out for many reasons. Resistance by many parties, doctors, private health insurance companies, different political opinions, etc. And that must sound very familiar for you. And that's why for 65 years, until 2006, we had a two-tier system, which I think is very similar to the current situation in Sint Maarten. We had mandatory public health insurance. That was for 2/3 of the population, mostly with a lower income. And we had voluntary private health insurance for the 1/3 population with a higher income. Over time, we got more and more problems with that competitive private health insurance market due to risk rating and risk selection. So in the end, the government had to come up with an act on access to private health insurance. That was 20 years before we implemented national health insurance, but I would consider that a kind of emergency legislation. There were differences. Well, another problem we had in the Netherlands was that in the 60s and 70s, costs went up very fast. Economy was rising, and then government felt responsible to contain costs. And at that time, the tools that governments used were central top-down legislation with respect to price controls, very detailed regulation of the fees that doctors should ask. They were not allowed to ask a little bit more or less. No, the government set the fees, capacity planning control, a macro budget, etc., etc. But the major problem was that each year there were escapes and the regulation had to become more and more detailed. And in the end, we had the feeling that that detailed regulation became unworkable. And that was a first reason why we needed reforms, say in the mid-1980s. A second reason was that, in fact, nobody in the healthcare system had any financial incentive for efficiency. Not the patient, not the doctors, not the sickness funds in the public sector, and not, well, private health insurance. They had incentives, but they were free rider on the cost containment by government. Thirdly, we had a very fragmented system, similar as yours. And then we had these problems with the market for voluntary private health insurance for 1/3 of the population. Well, here it is 10%. And some of the problems were due to risk rating and risk selection. In fact, that is the normal business model of any commercial private insurance company. And we love it when it comes to car insurance and fire insurance, but it's socially a problem when it comes to care insurance. So we had increasing problems of affordability for elderly and chronically ill, locked in, and the young ones, they switched to a lower priced product, so there was no solidarity. But it is also not fair to expect that a competitive commercial market for private health insurance can bring you social health insurance. In order to have social health insurance, I mean, with solidarity, you need government regulation. And that is very complicated on such a market. The Dutch government intervened in 1986, which what I called emergency legislation, the Act on Access to Private Health Insurance. And what they said is, private insurers, for some of these problem groups, you must accept them, you must offer them a standardized benefit package, and you are not allowed to ask a premium higher than a certain amount. And of course, normally private insurance companies would hate that. But then the government said, we will compensate you for all the cost above the premium level. And then they accepted it. But then, of course, there was no incentive for cost containment. In fact, they were at that time administrative organizations. That's what I call emergency legislation. And it took 20 years to come to more appropriate regulation of a competitive private health insurance market. So for all these reasons, in the mid-80s, there was a need for reform. And a major report came out, and the chairman was Wisse Dekker, the CEO, or a former CEO of Philips Company. And they came up with two major proposals. Let's move from government central top-down planning of the system towards regulated competition among insurers and among providers. And let's abolish the difference between the public and the private system, and let's come towards national health insurance.
During a recent visit to the Bahamas, Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, the Honorable Emil Lee, met with Dr. Delon Brennan, Project Manager of NHI Bahamas, to discuss the latest developments related to the implementation of their national health insurance. Quote, as part of our efforts to research and develop a sustainable model for St. Martin's NHI, we have been speaking to many of our other partners in the Caribbean to see how they are developing their models for NHI. We believe that it makes sense to learn from the successes and failures from others that have already developed or rolled out NHI, Minister Lee stated. He continued, the presentation from Dr. Brennan was very informative and contained many points of concern for us to consider and many recommendations for St. Martin to take into account as we develop our NHI program. Developing a sustainable NHI program on a small island is not a unique challenge, and we welcome the opportunity to learn from our neighbors.
Family law, criminal law, labor law, corporate law, immigration law, electoral law, tax law, environmental law, inheritance law. The law matters to you. A joint venture between the Department of Communication and the University of St. Martin. The lecture series, The Law Matters to You, is aimed at informing and providing the general public of St. Martin about the different laws. We invite you to visit the official government website at www.stmartingov.org for details on upcoming lectures. The law matters to you, bringing the law closer to the people.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of 30 Minutes with Government. For video on demand, be sure to log on to the official webpage of the Government of St. Martin at www.stmartingov.org. Be sure to like us on Facebook and visit our YouTube channel. My name is Giselle Misudan York. On behalf of us here at the Department of Communication, we'll see you next time.